We're pushing the meeting live now, so we'll get started in about 30 seconds.
Okay. The November 24th, 2002 Transportation Committee will now come to order. Clerk, could you please call roll?
Ms. Barnhart.
Here.
Ms. Barnhart is present. Chairman Colby.
Here.
Chairman Colby is present. Mr. Hebert.
Here.
Mr. Hebert is present. Mr. Chiofet-Lassi.
Here.
Mr. Chiofet-Lassi is present. Mr. Morelli.
Here.
Mr. Morelli is present. Mrs. Smith.
Here.
Mrs. Smith is present. Mr. Wilt.
Here.
Mr. Wilt is present.
Thank you. We need to suspend the rules of legislation for the purpose of prohibiting the public in-person attendance in accordance with Executive Order 202.1, which was extended through December 3rd by Executive Order 202.72. This is a non-debatable motion. We need a maker and a second, please.
Move it, Mr. Chairman. Seconded.
Moved by Mr. Rowley, second by Legislator Smith. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 All opposed, please sing aye. Motion carried. Is there anyone signed up for public forum?
There's no one signed up, nor were any written comments submitted in advance of the meeting.
Is there anyone present who has not signed up who would like to address this committee at this time? Seeing none, we'll move on to, we have a presentation. I would like to introduce Robert Franklin, the Chief Financial Officer of Monroe County, who is here to present the 2021 proposed Monroe County budget as it pertains to the Transportation Committee. We will have questions and answers following the presentation. Mr. Franklin, I would like now to open up the floor.
Oh, actually, hold on. He'll do that.
Okay. Franklin, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The 2021 budget presentation as it pertains to the Transportation Committee. I promise this will be a very brief presentation, all of 3 slides, including the title. Looking at DOT, appropriations for the department's Administration and Planning Division have been reduced by roughly $100,000 due to the filling of a full-time authorized position on a part-time basis, which impacts both salaries and benefits favorably from a budget perspective. And because the 2020 budget included a one-time appropriation for a vehicle. The Traffic Operations Division is higher overall by $2.5 million, and that's due to budgeting the full redemption of a $2.8 million bond anticipation note issued last year for highway lighting. That redemption is supported by appropriating dollars from the unrestricted portion of our debt service fund. Looking at Highway Engineering Division, appropriations are up slightly next year by about $580,000, and this is really due to an increase in the cost of our contracts with towns for snow and ice removal. It's about $5.3 million versus $4.8 million last year. Every other year, this division also budgets for a road condition study. So if you look in the appropriations detail, you'll see a $112,000 appropriation for professional services. And the budget for the Traffic Signals Division is lower in 21 due to lower electricity costs and a reduction in construction supplies, which is commensurate with the reduced requests from the City of Rochester, and for lower debt service. And lastly, bridge engineering appropriations are modestly lower, primarily because we included project chargebacks to our capital funds, which in our budget, you'll probably notice is included as a negative expense, bringing down all of interdepartment appropriations. If you look at the department as a whole, Specifically, looking at the department's revenues, you'll see they are lower by about $2.6 million. There's really only two significant drivers at work here. One of those driving revenues up and one of those driving revenues down. Increasing revenues is in our budget is the addition of appropriated fund balance from our debt service fund. That's $2.7 million, and it's coming from the unrestricted portion in order to redeem in full that bond anticipation note, and an additional $434,000 from our reserve for bonded debt. The driver lowering revenues is our decision to eliminate the below-the-line charge for snow and ice removal, what has been colloquially labeled as the snow tax. By eliminating that, that removes revenue from the transportation budget. And on our third slide, Mr. Chairman, I think this committee is aware that Monroe County is required to match New York State's funding of our bus company, RTS. This particular appropriation is not accounted for, however, in DOT, but rather you'll find that within finance unallocated. That's it, Mr. Chairman. End of the presentation, and we're happy to entertain questions.
Thank you, Mr. Franklin. I'll now open the floor for any committee members who have questions regarding the transportation portion of the budget.
Legislator Smith?
Go ahead, Legislator Smith.
Yes, I just want, I know this has been asked on the floor before by President Carbone and the majority leader, Steve Rue, but I'm still interested in finding out, would you be able to provide us with a breakdown of all the positions that fall under the portion of the 2021 budget that are authorized, funded, and vacant? This breakdown should also include each title and the corresponding budget amount for salary, retirement, social security, contribution, medical insurance, and dental insurance. We'd also like to know what the, indicate the fund, the department, and the cost centers charge for each corresponding position.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I know this question has been asked before, and I'm aware of the request from the majority leader. I think I've also reiterated that this request has been received by the budget office each year since I've been CFO. We have generally hesitated, and frankly, we have not responded to that request in prior years. We can produce reports showing who the staff are and where they work and where the vacancies are, but the reality is those reports become obsolete the day after they're run, given the county's turnover and our efforts to actively recruit and hire, which is a process that's ongoing continuously throughout the county. So rather than provide an obsolete report, Mr. Chairman, I don't think that is appropriate.
As a follow-up through the chair, I guess as a county legislator, for me to do my job and to be able to actually look over the budget and understand where salaries and everything fall, I feel a report like this would be very helpful for me to understand. And even if it is dated, most reports on sales of businesses, things like that, are up to a certain date, whether it's a week ending date, things like that. So I do believe a report like this, even if it becomes obsolete the next day, is also just good information for us to have as we review the budget.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I do sincerely appreciate that perspective. As someone who's worked in government for 17 years, and I've been doing budgets for about 30 years, I firmly believe that this legislature, within the confines of this budget book, has all the information to assess the appropriations that have been requested, including the salary and benefits requests for the positions that are authorized in the back of the book. So I appreciate your perspective, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you for that. Through the chair, what is the status of appointing a permanent director of transportation?
Mr. Chairman, Monroe County is currently interviewing for a permanent appointment to the director's position. A decision has not been made, however.
Thank you. I'm done.
Thank you, Legislator Smith. I have a few quick questions I'll throw in here, and then I'll open it back up to the floor. Could you give us a breakdown percentages of what the department budget, mandatory versus non-mandatory, is either right now or if you don't have it before the full ledge?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. This question has come up a couple other times. We maintain the percentages for all the departments, so I'll provide that prior to the December meeting.
And also, what is the breakdown of the DOT's budget as it relates to the appropriate charges to the general fund, road fund, and debt service fund, and capital projects fund?
Mr. Chairman, we can provide that detail. The Department of Transportation, I think you know, receives a contribution from the general fund that is generally equal to the debt service required on transportation projects. But I will have that to you in writing, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much. One other quick question here, then I'll move on. How much, if any, unrestricted general fund balance is being applied to the Department of Transportation budget? And if any unrestricted general fund balance is being applied, what is the breakdown of restricted versus unrestricted applying to the balance fund?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Actually, no, there are no general fund balances being appropriated for transportation. We are appropriating portions of our debt service fund balance. We are appropriating just over $2.7 million from the unrestricted portion of our debt service fund for the full redemption of a band issued for a highway lighting project. We also have from our reserve for bonded debt, which is the restricted portion of the debt service fund, just over $434,000. And that is funds derived from closed capital projects which have excess borrowed funds remaining. By law, we transfer those excess borrowed dollars to our reserve for bonded debt, and those dollars can only be used for future debt service related to the capital funds from which they were originally derived.
Thank you. Is there any legislators on the floor that would like to address this committee? Question. Legislator Hubert?
Mr. Chairman, yes, please. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have several questions here. I'd like to go back to what Legislator Smith asked you about and just ask a couple of questions on that very first question. Through you, Mr. Chairman, to the administration, as I understand it, the list of employees, I'll call it, that's in the budget book are the authorized positions, correct?
Mr.
Chairman, does this have anything to do with transportation? I believe in the last committee, it was discussed that only questions could be asked if they pertained particularly to the committee. So perhaps this is a question Mr. Hebert can ask in Ways and Means.
I certainly could, but I'm interested in it for the Transportation Committee as well.
Do you have is there specific questions, Mr. Hebert, then that you'd like to ask? Because otherwise it seems like this is just a
Sure, I can change the question. No problem. Thank you, sir. Through you, Mr. Chairman, to the administration, in the Transportation Department, there is a list of authorized positions in the budget book. And it's my understanding that those are the authorized positions, correct?
That is correct, Mr. Chairman. I believe the legislator is referencing way in the back of the book by department the authorized position.
That's correct, Mr. Chairman. And through you to the administration, an authorized position is not necessarily funded when it's in the Transportation Department, correct?
Mr. Chairman, within transportation, like any department, Authorized positions may or may not be funded in full or in part.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chairman, I think this gives another reason to ask for the Transportation Department employees and the positions that are authorized and those that are funded so that a comparison can be made. And I'd like to make that request, please, to the administration.
I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman. I have to respectfully disagree based on my knowledge of budgeting practices and the requirements of general municipal law in terms of putting together a budget.
All right, I'm going to move on to appropriation questions. I'm sorry, before I get to the appropriation questions, when you did your presentation, Mr. Franklin, through the chairman here, you indicated that we are required to match the state contribution to the Greater Regional Transit Authority. It's pretty well known that the state is looking to reduce monies wherever possible. If they were to reduce monies to RGRTA, would we do the same?
Mr. Chairman, we would.
Thank you. And through you, Mr. Chairman, to the administration, if we were to reduce that money that was approved in the budget, how would that be handled? Where would any reduction go, et cetera?
Mr. Chairman, the appropriation for our payment to RGRTA is budgeted for within finance unallocated. If that appropriation were to go partially unutilized, the remaining appropriation would remain within finance unallocated unless at such time it was requested to be transferred. This is similar to the questioning around travel. If this community faces critical COVID-19 response needs, we can request that these dollars be transferred to an appropriate COVID response action.
Thank you, Mr. Franklin. And through you, Mr. Chairman, of the administration, would such a transfer have to come to the legislature for approval?
Mr. Chairman, transfers between departments in excess of $10,000 do require legislative action. In prior practice, we have reported those transfers on our monthly interim financial statements.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chairman, I'm referring now to page 536. I'll give you a minute to get there.
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Under Appropriations, Transportation, DOT Administration, appropriate for salaries, it's line item 501000, fall from $238,000 and change in 2020 to $178,000 and change in 2021. Could you please explain this decrease in appropriations?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Some of this reduction relates to the staff turnover with our former director leaving, and we are in the process of hiring a new director. There are several other positions that have turned over. Generally speaking, new hires, whether line staff, management staff, or even the department director, are generally brought in at a lower salary, allowing us to reduce the budget request for 2021. I also know that the department intends to fill one of their full-time positions on a part-time basis.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chairman, once again on page 536, same area, line item 501005. It rises from $37,000 in 2020 to $65,000 in 2021. Please explain that again for the increase.
Mr. Chairman, I'm not sure of the history as to why we do this, but for whatever reason, the temporary help line is where Monroe County budgets and expenses paid for part-time employees.
So that, through you, Mr. Chair, so this is related to the hiring of the part-time person versus the full-time person?
Sorry, Mr. Chairman, I should have been a little more clear about that. Yes, it is.
Thank you. On page 539 now, through you, Mr. Chairman, the administration, Department 80, line 9, 5 zeros. It changes from no dollars in 2020 to minus 30,000. You may have explained this before, but I wasn't able to keep up as far as your comments in my notes. So could you just explain that?
That's okay, Mr. Chairman, but I'm sorry. Oh, we're on page 539, correct, Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Okay, yes, Mr. Chairman, page 539, Project Chargebacks. So DOT is a little unique. There are, for some reason, federal and state aidable capital projects where when we charge $1, we actually get reimbursed more than $1. It's like there's an overhead add-on that is allowed. So this is a situation in which Department of Transportation is providing time and effort to an authorized capital project, and we are allowed to charge back that capital project for such time and effort and actually derive more reimbursement from the state or federal government.
Thank you, and that's very interesting. I had not realized that. Through you, Mr. Chairman, could you please, hang on one second. Through you, Mr. Chairman, the administration, this has sort of been asked in the prior committees. Could you provide a breakdown of cellular telephone appropriations for the department? And same sort of questions that came up in prior committees.
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Would you, through the Mr. Chairman, would you please do so at this time?
Mr. Chairman, we will do so prior to the December 8th legislative meeting.
That's fine. Thank you very much. And I return the floor to you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, legislator. Does anybody else has questions?
Legislator Wilt.
Legislator Wilt, you have the floor.
Through the chair, revenue, transportation, highway engineering, and operations. Revenue for state aid is budgeted at 7.2 million. Held flat for 2020 and fairly consistent in 2019 actuals. Through the chair, does the administration not accept these funds to be subject to the governor's 20% cut? And what committees, if any, does the county have in hand that we will receive the full allotment?
Mr. Chairman, at the time this budget book was put together, it was not anticipated that, by the way, this is state aid relative to the CHIPS program. At the time this budget was pulled together, it was not anticipated that CHIPS reimbursement would be subject to the 20% withhold. We have more recently learned that New York State DOT is working on an option to not withhold 20% reimbursement, but rather perhaps lower the allocations to the counties by 20%. And we are working on clarifying exactly which way New York State DOT is going to go with that.
Through the chair, how soon do you think you'll hear about that?
Mr. Chairman, in all honesty, I do not know.
Okay, thank you. On page 675 of the revenue, transportation, highway engineering, and operations, revenue for state aid is budgeted at $7.2 million, held flat for 2020 and fairly consistent with 2019. through the chair, does the administration not expect these funds to be subject to the governor? It's the same question again. I don't know why I have it here, but let me go on to another question. Page
Okay, thank you.
on page 723, through the chair, transportation personnel proposed budget is increasing the number of highway maintenance mechanic tows slightly 16 to 19 position. Through the chair, what is the need for these increases and how many people currently hold that title?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, that was actually a request of the former department director. There were, I believe, 4 seasonal employees, which are treated in a budget as a part-time employee. But due to recruitment and retention problems, the department director requested to create instead full-time positions and reduce the seasonal. I believe that also reflects within the traffic operations and permits division of DOT. And yes, where in 2020 they had 19 full-time and 4 part-time positions, the budget request for 21 would instead reflect 22 full-time and 1 part-time positions. And this was done as a recruitment and retention solution.
Thank you. No further questions.
Legislator Smith.
Legislator Smith, you have the floor.
Thank you. Many residents complain when the county chip seals or does the oil stones over the roads because of the mess it can make to their cars. Makes it especially difficult for bicyclists who are riding the roads. Sir, can you tell me how much the county is budgeting for chip sealing in 2021?
Mr. Chairman, I believe we have both Jim Pond and Tom Fries on the line who will probably be in a better position to answer that question.
Yes, this is Tom Fries from the Deputy Director for Monroe County DOT. At this time, we don't actually have an exact budget amount yet. We are putting our program together right now. Those chip seals typically come out of the CHIPS account. And once we get our program together, our mantra is obviously put the right treatment on the right road at the right time. So we are currently looking at the roads, and we will be having some of them, of course. I know people don't like it, and it's not favorable, but they are like 20% less expensive than a mill and resurface. So we can get almost 5 times as much oil and stone roads as we can the mill and resurface. So they're very affordable.
Thank you. As a follow-up question to that through the chair, do you have a list of roads that are going to go through this process, or is that what you're currently working on?
Through the chair, we are currently working on it right now.
Thank you. Through the chair, would you be able to give us an overview of what the chip sealing process is about?
Certainly. Through the chair, we clean the road. After we clean the road, we put down an emulsion. Once we put down the emulsion, we put down stone. Then we let the stone sit for a little bit. Then we sweep it once. Then we let traffic drive on it. Then we sweep it again.
Great, thank you. And through the chair, the street sweeper, is that mandatory for all Monroe County to use that to kind of clear off the road and also with the towns?
It's a standard process for that treatment. Yes, through the chair.
Perfect, thank you. Through the contracts with many of our local municipalities for preventive road maintenance on county roads. Over the years, there seems our highway departments have done quite a bit with that. I know myself being a former town board member of the town of Clarkson, our highway department actually did quite a bit for the county. Is there a reason to see a decline with our towns helping out on the county roads?
Through the chair, it's really based on their availability. They have their own town work to do as well as try to fit our stuff in. So we try to coordinate with them as early as we can, and then typically later on in the season, they get busy with leaf pickup or things like that, and they can't quite get to all the work we have for them.
Okay, thank you. As a follow-up through the chair, do you guys have a breakdown of how much preventive maintenance work will be done by the county, DOT, municipal highway departments, and any private contractors for 2021?
Through the chair, again, that is being worked on right now.
Okay, just as a follow-up through the chair, it would be great to be able to see that list once you guys have it. Through the chair, and another follow-up question, is there any time that you pass over a town highway department and give that work to a private contractor?
Through the chair, we wouldn't give it to a private contractor. We would probably offer it to another town instead.
Okay, thank you. Through the chair, I see that we're currently utilizing pavement quality index scores from 2017. When is the last time the scores were updated by the county, and when should we expect to see the next updated scores?
Through the chair, we actually have 2019 results now, and we're going to be getting them again in 2021.
Perfect. And is that something you can share with us, the score?
I'm sorry, through the chair, I don't understand the question. What would you like shared?
You said you have the 2019 scores?
Yes.
If those could be forwarded on, that would be great. Thank you.
Certainly.
Through the chair, one last question. The Jacobs Bridge Road over Yantee Creek and the North Hamlin Road Bridge over Sandy Creek, both in the town of Hamlin, are owned by Monroe County. They were rated to be in poor status by the New York State DOT. The Jacobs Road Bridge inspection was performed in May 21st of 2020, and the North Hamlin Road Bridge inspection was performed November 12th of 2018 and is due for another inspection. However, neither of these bridges are included in the 2021 to 2026 CIP, nor did I see any funding in 2021 to have these bridges fixed, but I did see the Moscow Road Bridge in the town of Hamlin did have an inspection in April. It was not found to be in poor status, but I do see that you have it in your work to be done in 2025. I was just wondering if you could explain why that bridge seems to be moved up, and the other two have not been found a place to be fixed yet.
Through the chair, I would have to get back to you on that. I'd have to talk with our bridge engineer. I would suspect it's got to be based on current status, based on our inspection reports, and just programming it into the system.
Okay, yes, I definitely would like to feedback on that. That is in my district, and I would like to let my town know as well. So thank you. I'm done.
Legislator Barnhart.
Legislator Barnhart, please, you have the floor.
Thank you. Through the chair. Back, I don't know, I think it was 2012, my news director assigned me to go stand outside the Jefferson Road Post Office and ask people as they came in what they thought of the new snow tax in the county budget. Needless to say, I got some very colorful sound bites for the news that night. And here we are, 8 years later, and the county budget proposal is handling snow removal charges differently. I'm wondering through the chair if the administration can explain the decision to do this.
Mr. Chairman, I'm just trying to pull my thoughts together. In this position is Finance Director never exactly been the biggest fan of our below-the-line charges for snow and ice removal. When I first, so basically, the way the chargeback worked is, Mr. Chairman, Monroe County would, we pay each of the municipalities, the towns, to plow county roads. I live in Chili. If Chili charges the county $1 million to plow county roads, then we put $1 million below the line on Chili residents' tax bills. That's basically how the chargeback worked. It did not reflect the fact that while I live in Chili, I have friends and family in Webster, and I drive across county and all the other towns. So just as a more of a reasonable equity issue, and if Chili charges too much money to plow roads, not that they do, they charge just the right amount. I don't know, why would the residents of another town either pay or not pay for driving on a different town's roads? And it was an opportunity for this administration to change a recently changed practice. And I think the administration, there's been a lot of criticism, you know, in my 7 or so years in this position, I received enough criticism myself personally, over the phone and in person, that I was in full support of removing this chargeback.
Thank you.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, Legislator Morelli.
Legislator Morelli, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Through you to Mr. Franklin, is it fair to say that this is just an overall better way of budgeting?
Mr. Chairman, it is certainly in my personal and professional view, a more equitable way to account for plowing county roads across the county.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Legislator Keough-Felasi.
Legislator, I can't say your last name yet, right? Legislator Frank?
It's all right.
Well, I have to practice that. Sorry. You have the floor, sir.
Through the chair, on page 316 under major objectives, what is the status of the study on traffic signals and sign structures?
Mr. Chairman, if I may refer this question over to Jim Pond or Tom Fries.
This is Tom Fries. Jim Pond seems to be having an issue calling in. So I'm afraid we'll have to get back to that through the chair.
Through the chair, where is DOT at in terms of diversity?
Through the chair, are you talking about hiring practices, or are you talking work that's given out?
Hiring, both. Through the chair.
I mean, through the chair, we're equal opportunity, of course. And as far as the hiring for our jobs, we do have to meet MWB percentages if it's a county-funded project, or DBE percentages if it's a federal-funded project.
All right, that's all I got. Thank you.
Does anybody else have any questions? I have a few more if anybody else doesn't have any. Seeing none, I'll ask some. If you come up with some later, I'll be glad to turn the floor back over to you. I'd like to follow up on the snow charges. So, Frank, if you could answer me, some town people's taxes rate will go up essentially, and some will go down because you're applying the snow removal fee more over everybody at the same rate. Is that correct?
Mr. Chairman, by eliminating the below-the-line chargeback, we are in essence pulling, I looked over the past 5 years. On average, it was a $5.2 million below-the-line charge. So by eliminating the below-the-line charge, we are effectively taking $5.2 million on average off the collective tax bills of property owners.
I'll ask the question a little differently. So in the town of Ogden, if I had more county roads, I was paying a higher percentage chance of the snow removal because I had more roads in the county roads in my town than perhaps like the city, which I believe has very little, if any. I don't think they have any county roads. So right now they have no snow tax bill. Is that correct?
The way I'm hearing the question described, Mr. Chairman, is if you are in a high-cost snow plowing town, you will save more money than somebody living in a low-cost snow plowing town.
So this is going to affect the individuals depending on what town they live in differently. Some people go up and some people pay a little less. Is that correct?
Actually, Mr. Chairman, I think it's more appropriate the way I phrased it. Some people living in a high-cost snowplow town save a lot. People living in a low-cost snowplow town save very little. In essence, we are pulling $5.2 million on average off the tax bill collectively across the county. Some people will save a lot, some people will save a little.
Okay, I understand that. You're not pulling $5.2 million off the tax roll. You're just moving it to different, you're still charging that fee. It's just that it's going above the line instead of below the line. So you're not reducing the taxes on because of that, correct?
Interestingly, I'm going to split the answer, Mr. Chairman. In essence, the general levy above the line will need to support the cost of snow plowing county roads. In my 7 years as CFO, we would allow the tax levy above the line to rise as equalized values rise and charge the snow tax below the line. For 2021, the suggestion is to allow the levy to rise as equalized values rise, although at a slower rate, and not charge any below-the-line expenses. So in essence, if this were 2020, we would be taxing the levy increase and charging below the line, but for 21, we are only taxing the levy.
Thank you. Just for clarification, someone in the highway department can stimulate my curiosity. Is there any county roads in the city?
Mr. Chairman, I heard that, well, that was for bridges. I cannot answer that question, Mr. Chairman. Although, Mr. Chairman, I can certainly follow up and get the answer for you.
I would think one of the staff members.
Yep.
Yep.
This is Tom Fry, Deputy Director. Through the chair, we do not have any county roads in the city.
Thank you. Moving on to a different subject. On page 419, an appropriation, the finance unallotted for the proposed general fund contribution to the road fund is nearly $24.5 million. This is $7 million increase over 2019 actuals. What is the driving increase? I think you referenced this in the start of your presentation, but can you go in a little more detail? Maybe I didn't follow it quite as well as I should have.
Mr. Chairman, the general fund's contribution to the road fund primarily relates to the debt service associated with road projects. It's a little funky. On paper, the general fund pays the road fund and then the road fund pays the debt service fund for its road projects. The increase in the 21 request over the currently adopted 2020 budget is affected by changes in the 21 debt service. It's also impacted by the, if we pull the snow out of the below-the-line charges, effectively, transportation will no longer have that as a revenue source, so the general fund contribution compensates for that loss of revenue.
So that's a significant reason why of this change, correct?
Mr. Chairman, I was just flipping through the DOT budget. On page 323 is where you see highway engineering and operations. In the 2020 amended budget, there's a revenue line charged to other governments. It was $4,840,000. That would have been, on a budget basis, that would have been the revenue needed to be charged below the line. Now that we've moved snow plowing into the general levy, you see on this same page, the budget for 21 has no revenue for charges to other governments.
All right, thank you. On the same page on 419, the proposed general fund contribution to the road fund is nearly that same 24.5 million. Then you go to page 52 of the fund summary and tax levy calculate. It is only showing 9.3 million transfer from the other funds into the road fund. The summary sheet indicated that the transfer from other funds columns included the amount required for the general fund to support other funds. So why doesn't the table in page 532 reflect the general fund's contribution to the road fund?
The short answer, Mr. Chairman, is we're just trying not to gross up the budget. Page 52 at the front of the book is our means of getting authorizations on the transfers. I think in a previous answer, I said the general fund contributes money to the road fund, which then contributes money to the debt service fund. In practice, Mr. Chairman, the general fund just pays the debt service fund for road project debt service.
Thank you. It's a long ways around where that money gets busy, doesn't it?
It's a long way around, Mr. Chairman, absolutely. We just try not to gross up the budget. We would have had revenues in two different departments, and that by itself also tends to look funny. So it's kind of like, where do we want to look funny? And we choose this route.
Have any capital projects included in the 2020 to 2025 capital improvement plan and funds as part of the 2020 capital budget been delayed, downsized, or canceled as a result of appropriation restrictions imposed due to the county's financial position as a result of the COVID-19? And if so, can you please provide the committee with a list of those affected projects and the revised budget and or timeline for these projects?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, for this committee meeting, I know that transportation has 3 cash capital funded capital projects. Earlier in 2020, we did not transfer the dollars authorized. However, the authorized cash capital transfers were made at the end of October or early November. So those projects, those cash capital funded projects were initially delayed but are now funded. I am also aware of one road project that may have been rescheduled for the summer of 21, but I will confirm that with our transportation management and respond accordingly.
Oh, thank you. On the following up of that cash capital account, Does the 2021 proposed budget allow any cash capital for the county's DOT projects? And if so, why was the decision made to use cash capital instead of additional debt service?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The 21 budget request, similar to the 20 adopted budget, does have 3 cash capital funded projects for DOT, $450,000 for traffic engineering, $500,000 for the spot improvement program, and $300,000 for city traffic features. I'm actually proud to say that this is an opportunity for the county to fund its projects more effectively and cost efficiently. These 3 capital projects I mentioned, traffic engineering, spot improvements, city traffic features, like any other capital project in any department that are annually recurring of relatively the same dollar amount year after year, are prime examples or prime opportunities to switch over to cash capital funding. And I suggest that because if a capital project is going to be funded $1 million every year ongoing, it only takes between 7 and 8 years for the debt service to surpass the $1 million of planned spending. So by switching these over as cash capital projects, we fulfill the planned annual spending, but we avoid the associated debt issuance costs and the associated capital interest costs. It's a very effective way, and it took a long time to get us into this position, Mr. Chairman. When I first took this job, we were really cash poor, but we've done a good job turning things around and found ourselves in the position to move forward these cash capital projects. Like these annually recurring projects, I'll point out county information services. They also have capital projects that are annually recurring of the same dollar amount. However, they have the added circumstance that their technology improvements and computer technology changes so rapidly, in many instances, 3 years. I would hate to get in a situation where the county is borrowing money over a 5-year period at the least for computer technology that is obsolete after 3 years. So this was a pretty good opportunity that we were able to get ourselves into, and I'm really proud of that accomplishment, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. So the 450, the 500, and the 300,000, those numbers, that's an increase from prior years?
Actually, Mr. Chairman, they are consistent with prior years.
So we have an increase of cash capital projects, or we have?
In the Department of Transportation, the cash capital projects in the 20 budget was $1.25 million, and it is $1.25 million in the requested budget for 21.
Okay, so this is not something new this year. This is something that has been done by the prior administration.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. As a member of that prior administration, I'm the guy who spearheaded that initiative. We were able to turn this DOT around. I think it was it might have been 2017. I'll have to check my facts.
I remember having long discussions in the Capital Committee that I used to serve on about this, and I understand the concept and agree that it's a good concept. Only one last question here. There's approximately $23.8 million in the DOT projects, with the county funding just over 60% of the total project cost. Much of this includes equipment and preventive maintenance. But there are some rehab and reconstruction projects of county roads, including Salt Road and Lake Road, and I believe some on East River Road. What is the timeline of these specific road projects?
Mr. Chairman, if the transportation managers on the line aren't able to answer that question, we are happy to follow up with you in writing.
Thank you.
Legislator
Yes.
Keophilasi again.
Yes, go ahead, legislator.
Through the chair, does this change in the below the line charge mean that the city taxpayers will be paying for snow removal in the suburbs?
No, Mr. Chairman, I stand behind my remarks. This change in tax practice allows some people to save a lot, but some people to save a little.
And then through the chair, doubling back to the questions on diversity, is the county meeting our targets for diversity?
Mr. Chairman, I will have to defer to the transportation manager, Tom Fries.
Through the chair, yes, for the most part, we do meet the goals. Sometimes contractors do fall short, and in those instances, we do reach out to Irv Murph, and he signs off accordingly in recognition of that based on the reasoning behind the shortfall.
Thank you.
Is there anybody else that have any more questions? Seeing none, we'd like to thank Frank for your hard work and putting up with our difficult questions to understand in this.
Thank you.
The next item on the agenda is the approval of the minutes. You have the February 25th, well, that's a while ago, 2020 minutes for Transportation Committee before you. They stand approved unless the clerk is notified of any changes by the end of the day. Are there any other matters to come before this committee? There being no other matters, the November 24th meeting of the 2020 meeting of the Transportation Committee stands adjourned. The next meeting of the Transportation Committee will be on Tuesday, December 22nd